Prime Minister speaks about the fate of the East Container Terminal. COVID-19 vaccine free for the most vulnerable. Bilateral talks between President and Indian Foreign Minister. 4 suspects who poisoned the leopard arrested. India produced vaccine in markets by January. Hello there, very good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime News on TV1. Those were the headlines, now news in detail. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa stated in Parliament today that it has not been decided to transfer the management or part of the ownership of the eastern terminal of the Colombo port to a foreign company. He made these remarks when a question was raised by MP Anurakumara Disanayaka. Honorable Speaker, East Terminal of the Colombo Port is an important place for our country's development. The Good Governance government has arrived at a certain agreement with the following parties. According to the agreement dated 2017, April 26th, without the involvement of Port and the Naval Ministry, the agreement that was signed by the International Trade Ministry with the Indian government. 2019 May 28th agreement. The agreement was a joint agreement with the governments of Sri Lanka, India and Japan. I am now tabling the copies of those agreements to this House. Honorable Speaker, 5 phases of the Jayabahu terminal project was delayed. Because of this delay, we had to leave the cranes without using them. Without just keeping these gantry cranes aside, we decided to use them at the East Container Terminal as a solution for the congestion at the Colombo port. Honorable Speaker, we have not made any decision to vest the ownership or management of the East Container Terminal to any foreign entity. Sports Minister Namal Rajapaksa has emphasized the need to investigate reports of people being charged to undergo quarantine at certain hotels in the recent past. In a statement published on social media, the minister said the process of charging Sri Lankan expatriates to undergo quarantine at a hotel at an exorbitant cost must be suspended immediately. He said all Sri Lankan expatriates must be placed in quarantine at zero cost by the government of Sri Lanka rather than having them to pay quarantine at hotels. Moving along, Indian Foreign Minister Dr. J. Jaishankar met President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today. The bilateral discussions took place at the Presidential Secretariat. Indian Foreign Minister Dr. J. Jaishankar arrived on the island yesterday afternoon for a 2-day official visit. Earlier in the day, the visiting Indian Foreign Minister has held bilateral discussions with the Sri Lankan Minister of Foreign Relations, Dinesh Gunawardena. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa will host the Indian Foreign Minister for dinner. This will be the first visit of a high-level diplomatic delegation to Sri Lanka in 2021, as well as this is the first official visit of the Indian Foreign Minister for this year. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs states that these visits are expected to further strengthen the bilateral relations between the two countries. The parliamentary sessions were heated today as a debate revolved around the link between COVID-19 and the economy.
නව ජනාධිපතිතුමා බලයට පත් වුණාම විශාල වශයෙන් වැඩ බදු ඇතුළු අනිකුත් බදු ආදායම් සැලකිය යුතුයි.
It is very clear after the president came into power, the tax income was reduced drastically. Did it yield the results? The economy of the country during the first quarter was negative, even when the country was not impacted by COVID-19. These taxes were reduced after some far-sighted study. The money that has been printed in 2020 is 650 billion rupees. This is how the 2021 revenue and the expenditure will be covered. Economic growth is negative now, but there are discrepancies between the numbers issued by the central bank, so there is a problem with the reliability of this data.
නිවැරදි සංඛ්‍යාලයකන ලබා දීමට ඔබතුමා මුදල් ඇමතුමා හැටියට අග්‍රාමාත්‍යතුමා හැටියට ගන්න පියවර මොකක්ද කියන එකත් දැනගන්න කැමතියි.
ඒ වුණාට අපි දැක්කා ඍණ.
One thing I admit at the time was that this tax cut came during the COVID-19 pandemic, which led to a negative 16% economic growth. We saw a positive growth of 1.3% as soon as the lockdown was removed. That is why the central bank's forecast is -3. The whole world has become negative.
අපි සන්තෝෂ විය යුතු දේ තමයි මුළු ලෝකයේම අද තියෙන ඍණ තත්ත්වයක.
2 people died from COVID-19 yesterday, increasing the death toll in the country to 217 as of this morning.
The Government Information Department stated that the deceased was 68-year-old female from Matale and a 75-year-old female from Kalutara. Meanwhile, 479 people were tested positive for COVID-19 yesterday. According to the Government Information Department, all of them were linked to the Palayagoda cluster. The total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country has risen to 45,726. 445 people have fully recovered today, and the total number of recoveries stands at 38,262. The Ministry of Education said all health guidelines with regard to the reopening of schools on the 11th of January were issued to the relevant stakeholders. Professor Kapila Pereira, the Education Secretary, further noted that schools will open for Grade 1 students in the new year on the second week of February. Department of Buddhist Affairs stated all Dhamma schools will reopen on the 17th of January. Buddhist Affairs Commissioner Sudanta Karya Perumal stated that except for the Western Province and isolated areas, Dhamma schools will reopen. Minister of Tourism Prasanna Ranatunga yesterday said airports will reopen for all tourist arrivals starting from the 21st of January. Deputy Director General of Health Services Dr. Hemantha Herath said the health authorities have already issued the respective guidelines to be followed in this regard to the relevant stakeholders.
Acting Director General of Health Services, Dr. Hemantha Herath says that the COVID-19 vaccine will be provided to free of charge for all Sri Lankans.
We
are giving this vaccine to all vulnerable groups. This will be provided free of charge. In this vaccination process, if there is a person who does not belong to the priority vulnerable list and if they need to obtain the vaccine, we will arrange it through the private sector. This process will not discriminate against any person on their income. The only consideration will be their vulnerability. The government will provide this to all vulnerable groups in the society after monitoring it and looking into the issues in this regard. Likewise, it will be provided free of charge. However, permission will be granted only after a clear observation of the situation. The Indian Foreign Ministry says that India will begin exporting locally made coronavirus vaccines within a fortnight of their launch. Indian authorities announced that priority will be given to South Asian countries when the vaccine is being exported. The official dismissed reports that India would ban exports of vaccines it is producing to meet local demand. India makes about 60% of vaccines globally and many countries are eagerly waiting for it to begin shipping doses. It has formally approved the emergency use of 2 vaccines as it prepares to begin giving jabs in January. India is planning one of the world's biggest inoculation programs, seeking to immunize about 300 million people by July. The country's drugs regulator has given the green light to 2 vaccines, one developed by AstraZeneca with Oxford University and one by firm Bharat Biotech. India is planning on one of the world's biggest inoculations programs, seeking to immunize about 300 million people by July.
Saman Ratnapriya, chairman of the Government Nurses Association, stated that the hospital cluster has now joined the clusters that increase the risk of COVID-19 in the island.
Today there are clusters in hospitals, National Hospital Kandy, Ketumatu Hospital and some hospitals in the Gampaha district. The closest example is our hospital cluster in the Ratnapura hospital. The authorities have closed 3 wards there. Today 5 nurses and a doctor have been infected. A health worker died 3 days ago at the Homagama hospital. He was found positive for COVID-19 after his death. He has other diseases as well.
COVID-19 positive.
Parliamentarian Mano Ganeshan raised a question at a press conference of the Samagi Jana Balavegia. He asked whether the country is led by leaders or dealers.
දැන් බලා යනකොට මේ ආණ්ඩුව ලීඩර්ලගේ ආණ්ඩුව නෙවෙයි ඩීලර්ලගේ ආණ්ඩුව වෙලා ඉවරයි.
Looking at it now, this government is not a government of leaders but a government of dealers. A new group has come up. A group of dealers has come up now. The president is issuing a gazette reducing prices of commodities and taxes, but these concessions are not given to the public. It is not even given to the treasury or the people. These go to the pockets of those dealers who are ruling this country now. The government is bringing tourists from Ukraine. This is also done by these dealers.
මේක අර ඩීලර්ලගේ වැඩ. ඩීලර් දැන් ලීඩර්ට වඩා ලොකු වෙලා ඩීල් දාලා තමයි මේක කරගෙන වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. ඉන්දියාව, පාකිස්තානය.
India, Pakistan and Nepal have already repatriated their citizens from the Middle East. Only Sri Lankans are desperately living in the Middle East now.
අනාථ වෙලා මෙතන ජීවත් වෙනවා. මේ යුක්‍රේනයෙන් ආපු 6 දෙනා මේ වෙනකොට හොයාගෙන ඉන්න පොසිටිව් වෙලා ඉන්න අය මේ
There is a suspicion that the 6 tourists who came from Ukraine and found positive are contracted with the new COVID-19 strain. While our own foreign workers are being obstructed, what is the underlying motive of bringing tourists from Ukraine to develop the tourism industry in the country? We have doubts as to why they are doing this. Udayanga Veeratunga was the former ambassador to Russia and he is currently out on bail. The doubt we have is whether they are using this tourism project to bring the money they earned through the MIG deal which happened in Ukraine.
මේ සංචාරක ව්‍යාපාරය සිදු කරන්න කියන සැකය අපිට මතුවෙනවා.
Investigations have revealed that the leopard who was found dead near a small power plant in Rajamana Matale was murdered.
Matale Wildlife Director PMB Vijayakon stated that the autopsy revealed that the leopard, which is endemic to Sri Lanka, had been poisoned to death. 4 suspects have been arrested in connection with the incident and 5 teeth of the leopard were also found in their possession.
Remains of a fishing cat was discovered in Ledanti Marlborough Atta in Hatton. The estate workers provided the information of the remains. Police said wounds were observed on the neck and the feet of the animal. The Nallatani Wildlife Office is conducting further investigations into the incident.
In international news, dozens of Hong Kong opposition politicians and activists were arrested under the territory's national security law accused of submission over the primary election Democrats held last July to choose their candidates for legislative elections.
Foreign media reported at least 15 people had been denied in the early morning raids, the biggest crackdown so far under the security law that was imposed by Beijing on the 30th of June. A senior police source who requested anonymity told foreign news agency that around 50 people had been arrested. The Democratic Party said on its Facebook page, police arrested the activists for taking part in a ballot last year that was used to select the Democratic candidates for the legislative election. At the time, the Hong Kong government and Beijing both said the primaries in which hundreds of thousands of people voted could breach the national security law.
A World Health Organization team due to investigate the origins of COVID-19 in the city of Wuhan has been denied entry to China. 2 members had already set out on their journey. One has now turned back and the other is in transit in a third country. The World Health Organization said the problem was the lack of visa clearances. The long-awaited probe was agreed upon by Beijing in December after many months of negotiations with the WHO. The chief of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom, said he was very disappointed that China had not yet finalized the permissions for the team's arrival, given that 2 members had already begun their journeys and others were not able to travel at the last minute. Finally, in your sports news, New Zealand beat touring Pakistan by an innings and 176 runs in the second and final encounter. In the process, clinched the Test series 2-0. Bring to a close this edition of Lunchtime News on TV1. For details of these stories and much more, simply log on to our website www.newsfirst.lk. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Martin Satyanesan. You have yourself a wonderful day.